welcome back to Season 4 of HR as the White Swan. We're in the 7th episode of Season 4, and we're going to continue with the acronyms. Each question I'm going to ask relates to the letters in the term White Swan. I'm Elliot Clark, the CEO of HRO Today. We publish HRO Today magazine. We publish HRO Today EMEA and APAC, and we host the HRO Today forums held around the world and manage the HRO Today Association. Once again, today I'm joined by Judd Weisgal, who is the Senior Vice President for Madison Performance, and we send our appreciation and thanks to Madison Performance for sponsoring HR as the White Swan series. And what is the White Swan? The White Swan, or HR, should be that source of positive energy when negative events occur. That source of comfort, inspiration, engagement, and we've just come through one of those, and we all talked about the pandemic, but we're going to continue to have events that can drain the energy of an organization, things you don't anticipate. And it is up to HR to provide that positive energy. And one of those avenues is reward and recognitions. Judd's got more than 10 years of experience designing programs for some of the largest companies in the world to engage, reward, and recognize their employees. So, Judd, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be back as always.
Well, Judd, we're up to W, and W is all going to be about weighing the value. So companies do rewards and recognition, and we all understand that is, a program that different organizations put different emphasis on and whatnot, but we all know it's a best practice. So when you have a program and when you look to the program to really drive culture, drive behaviors, create productivity and engagement, how do you measure that? How do you weigh the value? What are the best practices that you recommend that HR practitioners, such as those in our audience, use to gauge how they're doing?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when we talk about weighing the value or the effectiveness of reward and recognition programs, if I'm being a little basic about it, it isn't very difficult as long as we boil it down to the basics. I see it like this. Like any other benefit we have, we look at things like the take rate or how many folks are using it. Then we look at the frequency rate, how often. And then we look at the ROI of the programs. Now, most organizations start by asking organizations like mine, like Madison, what kind of reporting we have. And my answer is always cat reporting, right? And that's a true statement. But I follow that up with, what kinds of reports do you want? What kinds of reports do you run? How often? How are they utilized, applied, reacted to? And that's where the answers tend to get a little fuzzy around this part of the discussion. And this is what I have found. I'm going to just tell you a quick story. I was at a convention about a year and a half ago. Remember those? And I asked a room full of HR leaders how important was reporting to them when it came to programs like ours. And every single hand in the room shot up. Every single person there told me it was without a doubt very important to have great reporting in their programs. So I singled out one executive, not to make them feel silly, but I just saw their hand go up and I singled them out and I said, when is the last time you ran the data? Is it weekly? No. Is it monthly? Sometimes. Usually every 6 months or so, or when someone needs something from the analytics. That's what we found. That's what we found out about that group of about 100 executives. And so it's super important, right? But we don't really use it all that often. And okay, I thought, what about the numbers? Show of hands if you've used at least the metrics that you found in these reports to make an effective change to the program. Have you done that in the last 90 days? Crickets. Have you ever done it? I got giggles. So this is where we are. We as an industry are hearing how important reporting is, and we're being told it's so important. What I'm finding is folks aren't really using it. It's sort of one of these check-the-box things during RFPs rather than a routine run during ownership. And while I don't think analytics need to be this super deep dive, you don't have to get lost in the weeds. But as I mentioned, understanding the who, the what, the when, why, how, that can help you with weighing the cost, weighing the effort, value propositions, etc. And are certain programs, doing great, going gangbusters, and others not being utilized? Well, then change them. So are certain departments performing well? and using the system often but running out of budget, well, then fix that, right? Use these reports and metrics to figure that out. Have a presentation to make on how the system is, benefiting folks. Arm yourself with usage and outcomes, and maybe even look at things such as turnover, absenteeism, engagement, all of these things to see if they've improved anecdotally or statistically. And if there's a tie, to certain areas of your program, highlight that. The more you're active in the system, using the tools and the resources and the reporting and paying attention to the changes, the ebb and flow, the more likely you are to not only be ready at all times to make a case, if need be, to leadership, but also to make the changes that continue to help the program perform for your people and for the organization that's investing in it. And I'll leave you with this. Consider things like surveys in addition to reports, but only if you're willing to act on the results. Nothing's worse than asking for feedback that will go unused or unheard. It can't just be an exercise. It has to be something you'll take action on. But there is, of course, much more, and I'm sure we'll talk a few minutes more about it. But as we said before, it takes constant organic change to maximize and weigh benefits of these efforts.
The Maestro product, the Madison Performance product, which I've had the opportunity to look at, as well as the top tier of the market in the rewards and recognition industry, Madison and the other top players on our HR Today Baker's Dozen, all pretty much have very good reporting platforms about what's going on inside the program. User engagement, how many times people are accessing the system, whether they're using their points or they're not using their points, spends tracking, things like that. What I think is interesting in what you're saying is that, companies also sometimes don't look outside of their HR practices. And I have an example. I think Wellable was the one that did this research study, but they went and looked at companies that actually had significant investment in employee experience. Okay, ones that had good engagement, survey programs, employee benefit, wellness more than benefit programs, and also had robust reward and recognition platforms. And the companies that were doing these things were outperforming their comparable group that did not by 1.5 times in revenue. Revenue employee was by 2.8 times, and profit per employee was 4 times higher for companies that had these kinds of investments. So, this requires a partnership between HR and finance, but do you recommend that periodically companies that are investing, let's say they're putting a certain percentage of revenue or comp, 1% of their comp budget goes to reward and recognition, but that they go back and say to finance, hey, can we take a look at how we're performing as this program's usage goes up and down on these non-HR related metrics? And have you had any clients that have done that? And, what's the outcome been?
When we look at our largest, most active partners, they are all utilizing data and analytics from the system in not just singular ways, but in very, very multifaceted ways. They are using it across all business units, all measures of performance and ROI, ROE, RO, whatever. And what they're seeing is that the programs themselves are great, but what you need to do is look at, are they impacting singular business lines? Are they impacting the organization as a whole? Sometimes even programs that are designed to only impact a singular line of business still very successfully impact other areas, right? An example might be a sales program, and the goal of it was very singular. Let's improve the numbers around this product or this service that we offer, and we'll use reward and recognition as a lever to pull for that sales organization. But then what they find is that the folks that are in the other lines of business are also seeing improvements, right? More sales means more activity in other areas. And then the reward and recognition is sort of increased around it. And so that then leads me to say to them, well, if you're going to look at budgeting, you're going to look at usage and analytics, what improved? It wasn't just the sales. It was the sales. It was the take rate. Now more people are participating. Your goal may have been singular, but your results were multifaceted. And then we'll see them use those analytics to not only inspire further program building, further budgeting, but further communication efforts. This was a success. This is what happened. So I think as we go on, the biggest concern that I have with all of this, Elliot, is that reporting and analytics are so critical, but they become like gym equipment when we buy it for our home. We buy it, we use it, effect wears off, the enamel wears off, and then it sits collecting dust. It was so important to have the fanciest gym equipment, but then we're not using it. And so I always want to encourage folks to stay motivated to use the tools at hand, because if we don't use it, it's completely useless.
Well, I feel incredibly guilty about the rowing machine in the other room now that you've said that. But I do want to say that the shirt I hung on it last night is dry now. So it is performing its new function. You made some great points. You know, folks in the audience, obviously you have these programs and there are reports that run off it, and you need to have regular meetings to review those reports. But also, I think, once a year, take a look at some of the business-related metrics and see if you can match trends up. And that really will help not only in your ability to weigh the value of the programs, but your ability to support and justify the value of the programs, which walks hand in hand. I want to thank Judd Weisgal, the Senior Vice President for Madison Performance, for once again giving us some really great advice. And please stay tuned for episode 8, where we will move on to the letter A. And we're hoping that you advance to that next podcast right after this. Thanks again.
To listen to additional podcasts in the White Swan series, visit www.madisonpg.com. On their website, you can also speak to Judd Weisgal to discuss this topic or to speak to him about your rewards and recognition program.